Hello, this is Lab 7, Flexure and Strain. Slides is by Evan, Naittra, and Jason.
So in Lab 7, the objective of this lab is to be able to understand what a strain gauge does and its purpose. In the context of this lab, we're using a strain gauge to measure the strain in a specimen undergoing a flexure test or like a bending test. Uh, the the specimen we're using in this lab, there's only one specimen, is made of polycarbonate. Uh, we attached a strain gauge to the midpoint of this specimen. We tested the specimen in two different ways. The first test, we bent the specimen around like this a circle, so there's an even uh, curvature around the entire specimen. The second test, we used the machine from the previous labs that performed the shear and the tensile stress to perform a 3-point bending test where the specimen is bent at one point in the middle and held up by 2 points at the ends. Yeah.
For data collection, a video was recorded, and in the video, the force and displacement were extracted from the video, and that was used to make a load displacement curve. And this load displacement curve was important because the slope was later used to help calculate one elastic modulus, which was denoted ES. Another method of calculating elastic modulus was just as we did in the previous labs of tensile testing, where we had strain and stress. And plotting strain against stress, we have a stress strain curve, which the slope is the elastic modulus. In our case, we got like 500,000, 551,713. And for our last part of the lab that we had to calculate was the beam deformation graph. This used the VX equation that was given in the lab manual with measurements and calculated values. The data 3 table is calculated on the right and reflected over the y-axis, creating this beam deformation graph, which kind of simulated how our beam turned out during testing, except to a lesser extent. For our elastic modulus is collected after the data and calculations. For ES, we got like 2.65, and ESG, we got 5.52. A friendly group shared their data as well, and their data was much more accurate. But there was a general trend where our ESs, or elastic modulus calculated, was lower, and our elastic modulus through graphical analysis was higher. Our percent error generally was not too high, besides the calculated one, and that was mainly due to the source of error, which was when we were applying the force during the 3-point beam bending test. The specimen experienced the force at a very slow rate, letting the specimen relax and produce inaccurate values.
Yeah, so we had a pretty high percentage error for our calculated values, but the value we got from using the stress and strain curve was a little bit closer. Um, our biggest source of error probably was on the 3-point bending test, where we were too slow in moving the bar, and the properties of the polymer, when there's a constant force acting on the polymer, the bonds kind of relax and stretch a little, which could have skewed the results. So I think if we uh, went went along with the test, we increased the speed, maybe we'd get more accurate readings. Another big source of error was the way like the strain gauge and how it interacts with the electromagnetic waves in the lab. You know, there's electromagnetic radiation from the lights from other machines that run on electricity. Every time that we tried to bend the polycarbonate specimen, the voltage on the multimeter like quickly decreased and like kept decreasing the longer we held it, which could have is this source of error just all comes from the fact that polymers behave a little differently compared to other materials. But from our results, we can tell that using the strain gauge is somewhat accurate at finding is pretty accurate at finding measuring the strain, measuring yeah. Um, and in real life, we can use these strain gauges for measuring really small strains, like in ridges where the strain isn't really physically noticeable. And in the future, we're gonna have to try to increase the speed where we applied the force to the beam so that the polymer doesn't have time to kind of relax its bonds and stretch, which skews the overall data.
And these were the references that we had where we got our literature value and a bunch of the equations from the lab. Thank you.